At Christmas, my dad declared, "We're selling our business. You're getting nothing." I smiled. Stick with me, because what I'm about to share isn't just a story about money or family. It's about betrayal, strength, and finding my own way. And if you connect with it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss more stories like this. That night, the living room glowed with warm lights and the smell of roasted turkey. My mom fussed over the table, trying to make everything perfect, while laughter echoed around the room. On the outside, it looked like the perfect Christmas. But inside me, I could already feel the storm brewing. My dad, Martin Caldwell, sat at the head of the table like a king ready to make a proclamation. My brother Derek leaned back in his chair with that smug grin he always carried, the one that made me feel invisible even when I had done all the work to keep our family business alive. I had spent years pouring my energy, my savings, and my heart into the company. Late nights, canceled plans, and sleepless mornings, while Derek was out drinking, blowing money, and chasing trouble. Everyone knew it. Everyone saw it. But somehow my father always excused it. Derek was his golden boy, the son who could do no wrong, while I was the daughter expected to stay quiet, work hard, and never complain. So when my dad put down his glass and cleared his throat, I thought maybe, just maybe, he was about to acknowledge me. Maybe he would finally recognize all I had done to hold everything together. Instead, his words hit me like a knife. "I've decided to sell the business," he said calmly. "And Derek will take over everything. Lena, you don't deserve any part of it." The room went silent. My fork froze in midair, and I felt every eye on me. Derek's smirk widened as if he had already been told the plan. My chest tightened, and for a second I thought I might break. My whole life, everything I had built, had just been ripped out from under me by the man I trusted most. But I didn't cry. I didn't yell. Instead, I smiled. A small, careful smile that made my father look confused for a split second. Inside, I was burning, but I refused to let them see me crumble. If this was their game, then I would play it differently. I sat back in my chair, sipping my wine as though nothing had happened. I could hear whispers around the table, relatives exchanging uncomfortable glances. But I stayed calm. Because in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. They had no idea what I was capable of when pushed too far. And that Christmas night, with the lights twinkling and fake laughter filling the air, my revenge quietly began. I still remember the first year I joined the company. Most of my friends were out enjoying their college lives, parties, road trips, carefree weekends. But not me. While they were dancing under flashing lights, I was in a dim office, double-checking invoices and making sure payroll went out on time. I thought it was worth it. I believed my sacrifices would pay off in the long run. Every late night I stayed to balance books, every meeting I prepared, every mistake I quietly fixed for my father. I thought it was proof of my loyalty. Meanwhile, Derek was nowhere to be found. He would breeze into the office maybe once a week, smelling of alcohol, bragging about some new toy he'd bought with Dad's money. When he did show up, he caused more chaos than help. He once signed a contract without reading it, costing us thousands. Another time, he missed an important client meeting because he was too tired after a night out. Guess who had to clean up the mess? Me. Always me. And yet, whenever I tried to point out the damage Derek caused, Dad shut me down. "Your brother just needs time to mature," he'd say. Or, "Don't be so hard on him, Lena. He's learning." Learning? Derek was 30 years old and still couldn't hold himself accountable. But in Dad's eyes, he was the golden boy, the one who could do no wrong. I could see it in the way Dad looked at him, full of pride and indulgence. With me, it was always different. A nod, a dismissive pat on the shoulder, as if all my work was just expected. There was one night I'll never forget. I was in the office late, staring at a mountain of paperwork Derek had abandoned. Mom came in quietly, carrying a thermos of coffee. She sat beside me and whispered, "I'm sorry, Lena. Your father, he just doesn't see Derek the way the rest of us do. He wants to believe his son is flawless." Her eyes were full of sadness, as if she carried guilt for not being able to change him. I wanted to cry, but I just forced a smile and kept typing. That conversation replayed in my head often. It made me realize something I had refused to accept for years. No matter how much effort I gave, no matter how much money I invested, or how many opportunities one missed to build the company, my father was never going to see me the way he saw Derek. In his mind, Derek would always be the heir, and I would always just be extra. It stung more than I ever admitted out loud. But sitting there year after year, sacrificing my life for a man who never valued it, I began to understand the truth. My father never intended to reward me. His loyalty was already spoken for, and it wasn't mine. The silence after my father's words was louder than any scream. I could feel the weight of every gaze in that dining room pressing against me. My aunts shifted uncomfortably, my cousins avoided my eyes, and even my mother stared down at her plate as if she could disappear into it. No one spoke up for me. Not one voice challenged my father's decision. It was as though my years of sacrifice had been erased in a single sentence. Derek, of course, thrived in the silence. He leaned back in his chair with that smug grin, swirling his wine like he had just won a crown. "Don't worry, Dad," he said with exaggerated confidence. "I'll expand the business. We'll go nationwide, maybe even global. This is just the beginning." The words made me want to laugh, not because they were funny, but because they were so absurd. Derek had never expanded anything in his life, unless you counted his collection of unpaid bills. He didn't stop there. He launched into a speech about the sports car he wanted to buy, how he was already shopping for a new condo downtown, and how he'd finally get to live the life he deserved. His friends at the table chuckled, raising their glasses to toast him, while my own relatives whispered in hushed tones. I caught fragments, poor Lena. Always thought she'd take over. Such a shame. Their pity stung worse than their silence. I didn't need their whispers. I needed someone to stand up for me. But no one did. I sat there, my face calm, my smile still plastered on like a mask. Inside, though, my chest burned. It wasn't just anger, it was humiliation. All those years of sacrifice, all the sleepless nights, all the dreams I put on hold, only for my father to strip me bare in front of everyone. I wanted to scream, to throw my glass across the room, to demand justice. But I didn't. I held it in, because in that moment, something inside me hardened. I realized that they all thought this was the end of me. My father believed I would quietly accept his verdict. Derek thought I would fade into the background, leaving him to play king. The relatives thought they'd witnessed my downfall. But none of them knew who I really was. As Derek bragged about the luxury cars he hadn't even bought yet, as my father raised his glass to toast the future, I sat there and made a vow to myself. If they thought I would walk away quietly, they were wrong. Dead wrong. They had underestimated me for too long, and they were about to learn what happened when the person you crushed decided not to stay down. I smiled again, this time not to hide my pain, but to savor the thought of what was coming. Revenge didn't need to be loud. It only needed to be patient. Knowledge had always been my weapon, even when no one realized it. While Derek spent his days pretending to be a businessman, I was the one who built the foundation he stood on. I knew every client by name, every contract clause by heart, every loophole in the system. Numbers didn't lie, and I had spent years learning to make them sing. My father might have dismissed my work as help, but I knew the truth. I was the engine behind the company. Without me, Derek had nothing but a hollow title. As I replayed Christmas night in my head, the humiliation still sharp in my chest, I began to see something else. For years, Derek had pressured me to cover up his mistakes. Missing funds, unauthorized expenses, shady shortcuts to impress clients. He always came to me to make it look clean. And like a fool, I had fixed it. Not for him, but for the company. I thought protecting the business meant protecting our family's future. Now I realized I had only been protecting his reputation. But what Derek never considered was that I kept everything. Every sloppy email he sent begging me to fix it this one time. Every receipt he tried to bury in the books. Every file I had to redo, because he couldn't be bothered to read the fine print. I never deleted anything. My father thought he had given Derek the throne, but I held the kingdom's secrets in my hands. I pulled out my old laptop, the one I hadn't touched since before Christmas, and opened the folders I had carefully stored over the years. There it all was, evidence stacked like dominoes, waiting for the right push. Proof of Derek's negligence, his wasteful spending, even moments that bordered on fraud. He thought he was untouchable, but his empire was built on quicksand, and I had the map to every weak point. The more I looked, the more my anger settled into focus. I wasn't going to sabotage him. I didn't need to. If I exposed the truth, Derek would sabotage himself. The board, the clients, even my father, they could excuse favoritism, but they couldn't excuse fraud. And I was going to make sure they saw everything. So I started organizing. Nights alone at my apartment, files spread across the floor, coffee cups piling up on the table. I sorted emails into categories, printed bank statements, highlighted contracts Derek had botched. It was meticulous, exhausting work, but it felt different this time. It wasn't thankless. It wasn't for their approval. It was for me. For the first time, I wasn't trying to prove my worth. I was building a case. Quietly, carefully, like a shadow. They thought I had nothing. But I had everything. And soon, the same knowledge they dismissed as just Lena's work would become the very thing that destroyed them. I forced myself to play the role they wanted me to play. When Derek walked into the office with his usual swagger, announcing himself as the new leader, I smiled and congratulated him. My words tasted bitter, but I made sure my tone was sweet enough to fool him. "I'm happy for you, Derek," I said, watching his chest puff up with pride. My father stood nearby, nodding in satisfaction, as though he had finally broken me into the obedient daughter he always wanted. He thought he'd taught me a lesson in humility. To him, my calmness looked like defeat. To Derek, my politeness looked like surrender. Neither of them realized I was simply acting, blending into the background while they revealed their true selves. Derek wasted no time showing everyone just how unfit he was. His first move was to bring in his buddies, men who knew nothing about the business, but knew plenty about partying. He gave them flashy titles: Vice President of Strategy, Head of Development, Director of Operations. None of them could even explain a balance sheet, but they walked around like kings because Derek handed them power on a silver platter. I congratulated each of them with the same fake smile, all while taking mental notes of every disaster waiting to happen. At company meetings, Derek boasted about taking us to the next level. He bragged about his connections, his vision, his supposed genius. The truth was he had no plan. His vision was nothing more than buying luxury cars with company funds, hosting expensive dinners, and throwing around words he didn't understand. When the board questioned him, he laughed it off. When employees looked worried, he told them to trust the process. I watched it all quietly. Every reckless decision went into my growing file. Every dollar wasted became another line of evidence. The company had been my life's work once, and now it was turning into Derek's playground. I should have been angry, devastated even, but instead I felt something sharper. I felt a strange satisfaction watching him dig his own grave. My father, blinded by his pride, couldn't see it. He praised Derek for being bold, for finally taking charge. I wanted to laugh at the irony. Derek wasn't leading, he was bleeding the company dry. But I kept my silence, nodding along, pretending to admire my brother's strength. Behind closed doors, the employees began whispering. Clients grew hesitant. Vendors delayed agreements. The company was already wobbling, and Derek didn't even notice. But I noticed everything. I kept every memo, every reckless expense, every contract that reeked of negligence. They thought I was out of the game, but I was just sitting on the sidelines, watching carefully. I didn't need to push Derek toward failure. He was sprinting there on his own. All I had to do was wait for the perfect moment to show the world who he really was. It didn't take long for Derek's leadership to start cracking. Within weeks, he had dipped into company funds to buy himself a brand new sports car, the kind that roared louder than his empty promises. He showed up to the office parking lot revving the engine like a teenager, grinning as though wasting company money was proof of success. Soon after, he purchased a luxury condo downtown, throwing a lavish housewarming party where he invited more strangers than employees. He called it networking, but everyone knew it was just another excuse to show off. At first, people in the office tried to hide their frustration. They smiled tightly when Derek paraded his new toys and laughed at his terrible jokes in meetings. But underneath, resentment grew. I could feel it in the way conversations fell silent when Derek walked into the room. I noticed the rolled eyes, the sighs, the subtle exchanges of worried glances. The morale that had once kept our company strong was slowly leaking away, drained by Derek's arrogance. Clients, too, began to notice the change. Deadlines were missed, promises weren't kept, and Derek was always too busy entertaining to care. One afternoon, I got a call from a longtime client, a man who had trusted us for over a decade. He lowered his voice as he asked, "Lena, is everything okay over there? Things don't feel the same." I could hear the concern he tried to mask with politeness. That wasn't the only call. One by one, other clients reached out, each sounding hesitant, each testing the waters to see if I was still there, still steady. I listened carefully, but I never revealed my cards. I couldn't. If I jumped too soon, all my work would collapse before it had a chance to matter. So I kept my voice calm, reassuring them without making promises, letting them know I was still watching over things even if Derek thought he was in charge. They seemed relieved just to hear me on the line, though they never said it outright. At night, when the office was empty, I sat at my desk piecing together the puzzle. The folder I had started before Christmas had now grown into a binder, thick with evidence. Bank statements showing Derek's personal expenses charged to the company account. Emails where he lied to clients. Notes of meetings where his incompetence was undeniable. It was all there, laid out in black and white. The strange part was, I didn't even feel guilty collecting it. Derek wasn't just reckless. He was dangerous to everything I had built. If the company fell, it wouldn't just be me who suffered. Employees would lose jobs, families would lose stability, and loyal clients would lose trust. Protecting the truth wasn't betrayal. It was survival. Derek thought he was untouchable. But every dollar he stole, every arrogant mistake he made, only tightened the noose around his own neck. And I was the one holding the rope, waiting for the right moment to pull. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Derek had been bragging for weeks about a massive deal he was about to close, one that he claimed would change the future of the company forever. He strutted around the office, waving glossy proposal papers and boasting about his connections, promising everyone that this was the breakthrough we had all been waiting for. But I knew better. I had looked into the numbers, and the deal was a disaster waiting to happen. If it went through, the company would bleed millions and lose its credibility overnight. That was the moment I knew it was time. Quietly, carefully, I gathered everything I had been saving. The binders filled with receipts, the emails Derek begged me to clean up, the financial reports he faked to make himself look competent, all of it. I made copies, organized them into a clean, undeniable package, and delivered them discreetly to the board of directors. I didn't embellish, I didn't exaggerate. I simply laid out the facts. Derek had embezzled funds, lied to clients, and mismanaged the company into a nosedive. It wasn't my word against his. It was proof against pride. The day of the board meeting arrived. The air in the conference room felt heavy, thick with tension. Derek entered like he was walking a runway, grinning, clapping backs, cracking jokes. My father followed, proud and confident, ready to watch his son cement his so-called legacy. I sat quietly at the end of the table, my binder in front of me, my hands steady even though my heart pounded. Derek launched into his pitch, his voice loud and animated. He talked about innovation, vision, expansion, all the buzzwords he barely understood. Some of the board members forced polite nods, but most looked unconvinced. Then, when he was finished, I slid my binder across the table. Before we move forward, I said evenly, I think everyone should see the reality behind Derek's leadership. The room fell silent. One by one, the board members opened the files I had provided. I watched their expressions shift from confusion to shock to anger as they flipped through the pages. Gasps broke the silence when they reached the proof of Derek's embezzlement. A murmur rippled through the room as they read his falsified reports. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others whispered to each other in urgent tones. Derek's face drained of color. "This is a lie," he stammered, his voice cracking. "She's making this up because she's jealous." But the documents spoke louder than his excuses. The numbers were undeniable, the signatures his own, the evidence irrefutable. My father sat frozen, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on the papers in front of him. For once, Martin Caldwell had nothing to say. His golden boy had been unmasked, and I was the one who pulled away the mask. The silence in that room was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. My father's voice finally broke the silence, sharp and defensive. "This is nonsense," he snapped, slamming the binder shut as if closing it would erase the truth inside. "Lena has always been resentful. She's twisting things to make Derek look bad. You can't take her seriously." His words cut, not because they surprised me, but because they were exactly what I expected. Even with undeniable evidence in front of him, Martin Caldwell clung to his illusion of Derek as the perfect son. Derek latched onto his defense instantly. "Exactly. She's been waiting for this moment, Dad. She's jealous because I was chosen, and she wasn't. She made this all up." His voice trembled, his confidence unraveling with every word, but he hid behind my father's shadow, just as he always had. The board members didn't buy it. They exchanged glances, some angry, others exhausted, all of them done with the circus Derek had turned the company into. One of the older directors, a man who had known my family for decades, leaned forward and said firmly, "Martin, this is not jealousy. These are hard numbers. These are signatures. This is embezzlement." The weight of the evidence was undeniable. Page after page showed exactly where the money had gone: sports cars, condos, parties, all pulled directly from the company's veins. Derek shifted in his seat, his face pale and sweaty, while my father grew red with rage. He tried to argue, tried to dismiss it, but each time, the board shut him down with the facts I had laid out. Finally, the chairman cleared his throat. "We've seen enough. Derek Caldwell is hereby removed from his position effective immediately. And Martin, with all due respect, your judgment has proven compromised. We're stripping you of decision-making power until further notice." The words hung in the air like a final verdict. My father's mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time in my life, I saw him at a loss. His face, usually so full of confidence and authority, had gone pale. The board members' eyes turned to me next. "Lena," the chairman said, "given your knowledge of the business and your history here, we'd like you to step in as interim leader until we can restructure." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. After years of being overlooked, dismissed, and treated as invisible, the very people who once barely acknowledged me were now looking to me as the only one capable of saving what was left. I nodded slowly, keeping my composure, though inside I felt a surge of vindication so strong it almost shook me. I glanced at my father. His eyes met mine, but they were no longer full of authority or pride. They were clouded with regret, with the realization that he had chosen the wrong child to trust. For the first time, it wasn't me who looked small in his presence. It was him. And in that moment, I knew the balance of power in our family had shifted forever. The boardroom had emptied, leaving only the three of us. Derek slumped in his chair, his bravado gone, his expensive suit hanging loose on his frame as though it no longer belonged to him. His eyes darted to me, wide with desperation. "Lena, please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You can't let them do this. I'll fix it, I swear. I'll change. Just give me one more chance." It was almost laughable. The same man who had spent years mocking me, the brother who paraded around as the heir while I was treated like a nuisance, was now reduced to begging. But I didn't laugh. I simply stood tall, arms folded, and let his words fall into the silence. "Lena," he said louder, panic rising. "We're family. Blood. You can't just abandon me like this." "Dad, tell her." That was Martin's cue. My father straightened, his pride wounded but still fighting. His glare landed on me, sharp as a blade. "You think this makes you a hero? You betrayed your own blood to humiliate us. To humiliate me. Is this what you wanted all along, Lena? To tear down your family just so you could feel powerful?" I turned to him, calm, steady. Years of hurt simmered under my skin, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. "No, Dad," I said softly. "I didn't betray anyone. I simply revealed the truth." His jaw clenched. He wanted to shout, but I didn't give him the chance. I stepped closer, my voice low and even, the same tone he had once used to deliver his cruelest words. "Do you remember Christmas, Dad? You stood in front of everyone, announced you were selling the business, and told me I was getting nothing." The memory flickered across his face, and for the first time, I saw doubt in his eyes. I let the silence sit before finishing. "Well, I turned nothing into everything." The words struck harder than any scream could have. Derek dropped his head into his hands, shoulders shaking, while Martin's face went pale with disbelief. He searched my expression for anger, for triumph, but there was none. Just calm certainty. "You ruined us," he muttered finally. "No," I corrected him gently. "You ruined yourselves. I just refused to carry the blame anymore." And with that, I gathered my files, tucked them neatly into my bag, and walked toward the door. I didn't need to shout, didn't need to celebrate. The truth had already destroyed them more thoroughly than revenge ever could. As I stepped out of the room, Derek's muffled pleas and my father's silence echoed behind me. For years they had dismissed me, ridiculed me, erased me. But now, without raising my voice, I had become the one thing they could never ignore. The daughter who turned their betrayal into her triumph. Snow dusted the streets outside the Caldwell offices, the same ones I had once walked into with nothing but exhaustion and silent tears. Now, stepping through those doors as the head of the company, I was greeted not with suspicion or pity, but with warm smiles and firm handshakes. The employees stood taller these days. Their eyes carried pride again. Under my leadership, I made a promise. No more favoritism, no more reckless spending, no more silencing voices that deserved to be heard. Every late-night worker received recognition. Every loyal client was treated like the backbone they truly were. The business began to breathe again, steady and strong, its pulse aligned with my vision of fairness and respect. Within months, the tide shifted. Clients who had slipped away during Derek's chaotic reign returned, relieved to see stability restored. A major partner told me, "Lena, working with you feels safe again." That single word, safe, meant more to me than any inheritance ever could. For the first time, the company wasn't a stage for my father's pride or my brother's ego. It was a place where people thrived. And in building it back, I rebuilt myself. But there was no reconciliation. Martin never called. Derek tried once, a pitiful voicemail drowned in excuses, but I didn't return it. I didn't need their apologies or their presence. I was finally free of craving their approval, free of bending myself into shapes that never fit. My worth wasn't theirs to give or take anymore. A year later, Christmas arrived again. The holiday that once shattered me now became my quiet victory. My home was filled with people who chose to be there, friends, loyal colleagues, mentors who had stood by me when I had nothing. Laughter rolled through the rooms, music floated in the background, and the scent of spiced cider lingered in the air. I stood near the fireplace, glass in hand, looking at the faces that truly mattered. No smug brother, no dismissive father. Just warmth. Just love. As the chatter dimmed, someone called out, "A toast, Lena." I lifted my glass, meeting every pair of eyes. For a moment, I remembered the humiliation of the last Christmas, my father's cruel declaration, Derek's smirk. The sting was gone now, replaced with something stronger, steadier. "To second chances," I said, voice firm but light. "Not the kind others give us, but the kind we claim for ourselves." Glasses clinked, cheers echoed, and I felt a peace I had never known in that family home. I smiled then, not the practiced, brittle smile I wore last year to mask my hurt, but a genuine one. A smile born of freedom, resilience, and triumph. This time I smiled for real. Do you believe Lena was right to cut ties with her father and brother after everything they did? Or should she have given them another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if stories like this resonate with you, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one.